Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. Can you in the back hear me? No. Okay, I'll try again. Can you hear me now? Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Markus Stock. I am the principal of University College and a professor of German literature and medieval studies. Welcome to our annual Barker Fairley event presented by UC's Canadian Studies program. The title of tonight's program is Money's Too Tight to Mention, Writing Novels About Labor. At University College, we are extremely delighted to be joined tonight by an inspiring panel of writers who will lead a discussion on how our stories fit and don't fit the realities of work's hold on our lives. Before we begin, I wish to acknowledge the land on which the University of Toronto and University College operate. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today, this meeting space is still a place home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. I ask all of you to reflect on the Indigenous histories of the land upon which you live and work. Tonight's event is an annual tradition at University College through which the Barker Fairley distinguished visitor can share their experience and expertise with the University College community. To provide some context, the Barker Fairley Distinguished Visitorship in Canadian Culture was established at University College in 1985 to honor the Canadian painter and U of T professor of German literature, Barker Fairley. The individuals that we have been privileged to have in this role include Janet Sears, Jennifer Bachwal, Sarah Polley. Thank you for asking. It's the Sarah Polley who just won the Academy Award. Thompson Highway, Carrie Sakamoto, Miriam Tays, Carrie-Anne Liang, Donna Michelle St. Bernard, among others. They comprise a community of artists and intellectuals who have enriched our understanding of Canada as an evolving entity and of Canadian studies as an expansive and inclusive field. For the 2022-23 academic year, we are honored to have Thea Lim as our Barker Fairley Distinguished Visitor. Joining her and it's been a real pleasure to have you here at University College, Thea. Joining Thea on tonight's panel are novelist Sheila Heti and Suzette Mayr. We are looking forward to the upcoming conversations. To more formally introduce our panel this evening, I will now call upon my colleague and director of the Canadian Studies program at UC, Professor Siobhan O'Flynn.
Thank you, Marcus, and I will stand on my toes. So good evening, everyone. I'm Siobhan O'Flynn, Director of the Canadian Studies Program, and I'm also delighted to welcome all of you to tonight's event, Money's Too Tight to Mention, Writing Novels About Labor, and to introduce our host, Thea Lim, for this evening's discussion. Thea Lim is the author of An Ocean of Minutes, which was shortlisted for the Scotiabank Giller Prize, translated into 3 languages, and optioned for television. Her literary journalism and cultural writing has been published in Granta, The Nation, The Paris Review, Best Canadian Stories, The Guardian, Guernica, and more. This year, she is the Barker Fairley Distinguished Visitor at University College, University of Toronto, and she grew up in Singapore and now lives with her family in Toronto. And now let us give a warm welcome to Thea Lim, who will introduce our guests.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. Thank you to University College for hosting us and for hosting me for the past year. It's been a real honor. So we are going to have two readings from our guests tonight before we move on to our conversation. So I'm going to begin by introducing our first reader, Sheila Heti. Sheila Heti is the author of 10 books, including the novels Pure Color, Motherhood, and How Should a Person Be?, the children's book, A Garden of Creatures, and the forthcoming Alphabetical Diaries, which has been optioned for a television series by Hulu. Pure Color is the recipient of the 2022 Governor General's Literary Award for Fiction. Motherhood was chosen by the book critics at the New York Times as one of the top books of 2018, and New York Magazine chose it as the best book of the year. How Should a Person Be? Was named one of the 12 new classics of the 21st century by Vulture. Sheila's books have been translated into 25 languages. She lives in Toronto and Kawartha Lakes, Ontario.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for that introduction, for having me here on this panel. Thea and I were emailing, and I didn't know why she'd put me on this panel, because I didn't think that my books were really about work. And she's like, I didn't put you on the panel because we're friends. I really think your books are about work. And so I started looking at them, and I realized it was true, but I'd never thought about them as about work, because to me, I don't think about art making as labor. I think of it as something a little bit different. So I hadn't put those two categories together, but then I looked at the first pages of How Should a Person Be? And Motherhood and Pure Color, and they really are all about making and working, just not in a way that I had ever seen that theme with that word attached. So, yeah, I'm going to try to justify my place on this panel during the conversation through that lens. But I'm just going to read the first few pages of Pure Color. Even God is a worker, it turns out. I don't know how one can know so little about what one makes. I guess it's true. All right. After God created the heavens and the earth, he stood back to contemplate creation, like a painter standing back from the canvas. This is the moment we are living in, the moment of God standing back. Who knows how long it has been going on for? Since the beginning of time, no doubt. But how long is that? And for how much longer will it continue? You'd think it would only last a moment, this delay of God standing back before stepping forward again to finish the canvas, but it appears to be going on forever. But who knows how long or short this world of ours seems from the vanishing point of eternity. Now the earth is heating up in advance of its destruction by God, who has decided that the first draft of existence contained too many flaws. Ready to go at creation a second time, hoping to get it more right this time, God appears, splits, and manifests as three art critics in the sky: a large bird who critiques from above, a large fish who critiques from the middle, and a large bear who critiques while cradling creation in its arms. People born from the bird egg are interested in beauty, order, harmony, and meaning. They look at nature from on high, in an abstracted way, and consider the world as if from a distance. These people are like birds soaring, flighty, fragile, and strong. People born from a fish egg appear in a flotation of jelly, and this jelly contains hundreds of thousands of eggs, where the most important thing is not any individual egg, but the condition of the many. For the fish, it's less any one individual egg that concerns them than that the eggs are laid in the best conditions, where the temperature is most right and the current most gentle, so the majority might survive. For fish, it's the collective conditions that count. A person hatched from a fish egg is concerned with fairness and justice here on Earth, on humanity getting the temperature right for the many. 1,000 eggs are the concern of a fish, whereas the person hatched from the egg of a bear clutches one special person close as they possibly can. A person born from a bear egg is like a child holding on to their very best doll. Bears do not have a pragmatic way of thinking in which their favorites can be sacrificed for some higher end. They are deeply consumed with their own. Bears claim a few people to love and protect and feel untroubled by their choice. They are turned towards those they can smell and touch. People born from these three different eggs will never completely understand each other. They will always think that those born from a different egg have their priorities all wrong. But birds, fish, and bears are all equally important in the eye of God, and it wouldn't be a better world if there were only fish in it, and it wouldn't be a better world if there were only bears. God needs creation critiqued by all three. But here on Earth, it is hard to believe it. Fish find the concerns of the birds superficial, while birds are made impatient by the critiques of the fish. Nothing makes a person feel like their life's work or their self is less seen than when it's being judged by someone from a different egg. Yet birds should be grateful that someone is making the structural critique so they don't have to. And fish should be grateful that someone is making the aesthetic critique so they can focus on the structural one. God is most proud of creation as an aesthetic thing. You have only to look at the exquisite harmony of sky and trees and moon and stars to see what a good job God did aesthetically. So those born from the bird egg are the most grateful of all. Those born from the fish egg are the most upset, and those born from the bear egg aren't too happy either. Perhaps God shouldn't conceive of creation as an artwork the next time around. Then he will do a better job with the qualities of fairness and intimacy in our living. But is that even possible for an artist to shape their impulse into a form which is not, in the end, an art form? This particular story concerns a bird-like woman named Mira, who's torn between her love for the mysterious Annie, who seems to Mira a distant fish, and her love for her father, who appears as a warm bear. The heart of the artist is a little bit hollow. The bones of the artist are a little bit hollow. The brain of the artist is a little hollow, but this allows them to fly. Those who aren't hatched from the bird egg might wonder why it was birds who center their thoughts on their own selves, who are born to give the world its metaphors, pictures, and stories. Why should it have been given to the birds? A bird can learn to walk on the ground like a bear, and they can spend their whole life walking, but they will never be happy this way, while a fish on the shore gasps for breath, desperate to get back to the sea. How Mira would have loved to be born of the bear egg. How she would love to be an ambassador of a simple and enduring love down here on this earth. Yet whenever she sets her heart on such actions, they are wished for, strived for, and barely achieved. To properly love another one, this is the stumblingest part of her, the most nonsensical part, the part of her that is most scattered and always to blame. But she shouldn't feel bad about being a bird, for how beautiful are the flowers in her window, the flowers on her windowsill over there. How their petals and leaves make each passerby smile that someone loves beauty and cares. Her flowers make us think of the flowers in the soul of the person who put them there. It is the flowers in the soul of the person who put them there that makes us happy and enlivens our hearts. The beauty of the flowers is a clue to the beauty of a human heart. They are a keyhole into a human heart. In a fish's good act, even the smallest action, effectively done, is a glimpse into a human heart. And a glimpse into one heart is a glimpse into many, and the hopes of the bear are shared by all of humankind. And what opens one heart opens many. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sheila. I'm proud to assure you that you write about work. Our next guest is Suzette Mayr. Suzette is the author of 6 novels, including her most recent, The Sleeping Car Porter, winner of the 2022 Scotiabank Giller Award. Her other novels have won the Relit Award and the City of Calgary W.O. Mitchell Book Prize and have been nominated for the Scotiabank Giller Prize, the Commonwealth Prize for Best Book in the Canada-Caribbean region, the Writers Guild of Alberta's Best First Book and Best Novel Awards, and the Farrow-Grumley Award for LGBT Fiction. Mayr has done interdisciplinary work with Calgary Theatre Company, Theatre Junction, visual artists Lisa Braun and Jeff Hunter, and she was a writer-in-residence at Widener University in Pennsylvania. She is a former president of the Writers Guild of Alberta. Mayr teaches creative writing at the University of Calgary.
It's really wonderful to be here, and thank you so much, Thea, and I really look forward to our conversation. I'm going to read a small passage from my book, The Sleeping Car Porter, which, for those of you who aren't familiar with the book, it's set in 1929, and it revolves around a sleeping car porter named Baxter, who is working the the Montreal-Vancouver line. So it's a continuous run. And it is the fastest train on the continent, taking 88 hours and 45 minutes. And on this particular run, Baxter he's suffering from sleep deprivation, and the train gets stuck in the Rocky Mountains for an additional 45 hours. Baxter is also a closeted gay man, and he has a crush on his former porter instructor, Edwin Drew. And so I'm going to read a flashback to when Baxter was a porter in training, or in porter training school. Flinging along metal tracks in his luxurious prison, somewhere between Medicine Hat and Calgary, Baxter thinks about Edwin Drew. Mr. Drew in his finely cleaned and pressed monkey suit, sailing around like the King of England with his precise pronunciation, his brain a full set of Encyclopedia Britannica as he showed the new porters all stuffed into the off-duty car how to make down and make up a berth, how to fold a blanket exactly by drawing the blanket from the foot to the head, how to shake the curtain to quietly wake up a passenger who has to detrain in the night, how to use the whisk broom on a male passenger's jacket, an ostrich feather duster for cobwebs, how to sponge then dry off a washstand without leaving smears or blots or cloudy patches, the code names for mice, which is diamonds, rats, sapphires, roaches, which are rubies, and bed bugs, which are pearls in a car. How to deal with ladies having lady issues, how to deal with men having men issues, how to deal with drunk passengers, make them drunker, declared Mr. Drew, and he winked at Baxter while all the student porters laughed. How to deal with passengers who'd had too much to drink the night before, how to deal with a disorderly woman or sporting girl plying her wares on the train, how to calm down the sleep talkers, the sleepwalkers, how to know the time it takes for a train to travel from Chicago to Smith Falls, or from Duluth to Sault Ste. Marie. The infinite number of protocol crimes that could earn demerits, such as disloyalty, dishonesty, the use of intoxicating liquors, or frequenting of places where they are sold, immorality, insubordination, incompetence, gross carelessness, untruthfulness. The infinite crimes that could earn dismissal, such as disloyalty, dishonesty, the use of intoxicating liquors, or frequenting of places where they are sold, immorality, insubordination, incompetence, gross carelessness, untruthfulness. How to look in the little instruction handbook with its cardboard covers they all have to carry if they have any questions about the rules. Edwin Drew had a wide, clear face, sported wide shoulders, and Baxter wondered if he engaged in calisthenics. But when Baxter took a turn to show how he knew how to make up a berth, he had to shove the lower mattress into the upper berth and shove the berth back into place with all his might, sweat pouring down the sides of his head, his eyeglasses sliding down his nose, skating down the nervous moisture. He suddenly understood why Mr. Drew's shoulders and arms wielded so much power, how he swirled and folded sheets like a bullfighter and snapped up and snapped down the ponderous, heavy berths from the ceiling as though they were made of cloud. And I'll stop there. Thank you.
Okay. So when I knew that I was going to want to talk to authors who write about work, I knew that I wanted to talk to both of you because in some ways you are perceived quite differently. Suzette is perceived as an author of magical realism and weird fiction, as a queer author who writes about the ordinary and the supernatural in very evocative ways. Sheila is known as an author of metafiction and autofiction. I recently read an article in The Atlantic which crowned you the smutty mystic and referred to your most recent novel as a cosmological farce. So you're perceived quite differently, and yet I noted that in both of your work you come back again and again to the themes of the production of work and the workplace. I'm thinking of Mira in Pure Color, who thinks of all the time she devoted to career training as all that time, all that stupid time. I'm thinking of Edith in Dr. Edith Vane in The Hares of Crawley Hall, who has this mantra that she repeats to herself, I am the architect of my life, even though the reader sadly knows that the tenure committee is the architect of her life. And I thought I would just open by asking why. Why are your novels filled with characters whose sense of selves are so tied to what they make? Why is work in the workplace such a constant concern?
Okay, I'll start. That is such a good question. I wonder if it's because, my father was a big union steward guy, and and my mother was perpetually on strike because she was a nurse in Alberta, and the provincial government hated nurses, and you don't mess with nurses, right? Anyway, so that was the backdrop. We also had a picture of Marx on our living room wall, so it was kind of inevitable. But I also, for a long time I worked with Tom Wayman, who's originally from Ontario, but is now pretty much a BC writer, a poet, an essayist, a novelist. And he was always talking about the importance of showing work in literature, and he's written about it, and he just had no patience for, a fiction that had, or poetry that had magic money, where characters somehow have money even though they're never at work, or, they work maybe 2 days a week, and then a body is found, and then somehow they're able to get off work and they don't have to work anymore. So he just had no time for that. And I also worked with Robert Maisels, who was the same. So, and it also just struck me that it's hugely unrealistic to have characters who don't have some kind of work or have some way, of justifying the income that they do have. So.
It's funny how it often helps the work, actually. It's like a storyteller trick, like writing about money gives you a parameter within which the story can happen.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, I think for me it's because a book is work, like we're making it, and I like writing about the making of the books. So I don't want to, just like you're talking about, it's not very realistic for a character just to have no money concerns and money coming from nowhere. I also like to feel like, yes, this book came from somewhere, and it came from work, and it came from thinking about the book and making the book. And so I think there's a desire in me to have that be part of what the book is about, its own making somehow.
Yeah. And it's interesting because so much of a lot of conventional creative writing training is to try to hide the work.
Right.
Is to try to pretend you didn't work. So one thing that is actually quite distinctly different about your work, though, is that, Suzette, often when you're writing about the workplace, you're writing specifically about money, about livelihood or wage work, whereas Sheila, when you write about work, you tend to write more about a calling or a vocation, what I've even heard you refer to as a spiritual quest. And that's actually why I wanted to talk to you together, because both it's both work, right? Both are different ways of thinking about work. In some ways, it's curious that it's the same word and language, that we have no way to distinguish between two things which feel so different, and yet both are connected to like questions of value and meaning. So what defines the Suzette Mayr paragraph to me, it was actually very useful that you read that paragraph, because it's about to make my point, though I think any paragraph you read might do this. Your paragraphs are just so crammed with sensory and visceral detail. I picked up on the phrase you used earlier, luxurious prison, and I think that's actually the feeling that cramming gives the reader in the context of The Sleeping Car Porter. We feel so intensely how trapped Baxter is. And a Sheila Heti sentence transcribes the twists and turns of thought with such merciless precision that sometimes it feels as if the reader is tunneling, through a working artist's brain. So I wanted to know, how did you come up with the methodology for how you represent work in your novels? Or to speak plainly, how did you come up with the way that you write about work?
I guess a lot of it came from note-taking. So a lot of my novels, when I write them, I sort of don't really know exactly what I'm writing about for a few years, but I'm just taking notes, researching, writing, thinking, sort of writing everything down. And at a certain point, like with motherhood, in 2013, I think I had the conscious thought, I want to write about this question of, to be or not to be a mother, and like, what does it mean to choose not to, and is that a choice one can really make, and how does one make that choice? And I started going back through all the writing that I had done the previous 3 years since I finished and published How Should a Person Be? So that was like emails that I wrote to friends, my own journals, stories and fiction, just all of the material that I had, and started putting it together and just, and this technique of like flipping coins and asking questions of coins, like I had like, I don't know, 100 or several hundred pages of those conversations, and I often write without a book in mind. And then, so to start to assemble, and I kind of want to see what my themes are without deciding the theme in advance. Like, well, what have I been interested in? I think I prefer that way of thinking and writing because That way I'm actually building from who I've been and what's there, rather than trying to make something. I don't want to start with like the idea of making something from the world. I want to start from the idea of like, what have I been making?
Yeah.
And then to think about like, okay, how can this be for the world? How can this have a form? How can this have a shape? So a lot of the reason that there's thinking in those books is because the notes come from me thinking alone. Yeah.
Is that a similar kind of instinct to what you said earlier about wanting it to be clear that the work is happening, like wanting it to be rooted in something that really happened?
Yeah, like rooted in time, rooted in the amount of time it takes to write a book.
Yeah.
And I'm interested in the artistic process, and I'm interested in how something is made and how things are created. So, I think it's all.
Because sometimes it does feel like we're being led through the making of the book as we're reading the book. So now I want to know, when you're writing emails to people, do you know already that maybe this email will be in, or are you sort of just going for it? Yeah.
I think it's actually less emails, and more my journals and my notes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So it's safer.
No, my
if
emails
I send
are
you
not
an email.
publishable.
Okay.
No, they're not interesting in that way.
Yeah.
I think for me, the key to finding a character is knowing what they do all day. And for certainly adult characters, so what occupies their time, what profession do they have, and then in a way, I have to structure the book around that. And until I know what they do, I'm probably not going to get very far in knowing who this person is, which, what does that say about me? That I don't know a person unless I know their work, and I don't know myself unless I know work.
Though it's a classic question, what do you do?
Yeah, it is. And it can be kind of obnoxious too, right? So that's really important for a character. Even if a character doesn't have a so-called job, they have things that they do, and so what do they do? And as a result, I can figure out, what do they actually have time for outside of that or within that work? And then the other big element I have to grapple with, of course, is, being realistic about how a character makes their money, but not showing that job so much that it becomes boring. So it was really hard with the sleeping car porter, because all he does is clean up. So he cleans up after people, and he makes their beds, and he fetches things for them. And so, this book was about 40 pages longer. And then my beautiful editor, Alana Wilcox, who's in the audience, was, we can't, that's great, but do we need another scene of him cleaning, a commode? No, we don't. So that's always a big balance. Now, in terms of the methodology, like I said, the hard part is figuring out, okay, how much is enough, of showing the work, and how much is too much, and that's really the hard part. But I don't.
So how do you know?
How do I know? I guess it's because the books are about work, but they're not about work. So The Sleeping Car Porter is about being a porter, but it's also about him figuring out his love life. Dr. Edith Vane in The Hares of Crawley Hall is about a professor who has basically a nervous breakdown, and she is at work constantly in that book, but she's also not at work. She's even when she's physically present in a classroom, she's drifting off somewhere else. So I think it's just good to, I think there's probably no one way to do it, and it depends entirely on what the character does.
Annoyingly, because then you have to redo it with every new book. You can't just phone it in.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I was thinking of what you said earlier about, kind of being instructed that by mentors or people that you respected, that there has to be work in it. But it sounds almost like, from what you say about, like, I feel like I don't know who they are until I know what they do for work, that it wasn't like you had to intentionally put that in, but that also was a natural way of engaging with the material.
It was naturally shaping all the stories.
Yeah. I'm curious to know why. I'm the same way. I always want to know what people do, even though I know it's a rude question. Even though I have often in my life hated it when people ask me that question. I've said things like, I'm wasting my potential. That's what I do. But I'm the same way, and it would probably take a long time to get to the bottom of why that is. But yeah, I do always want to know what people do. So in How Should a Person Be, the protagonist says, if I make bad work, it tarnishes my life. And there's this sense that bad work does something to us that is irreversible. The Sleeping Car Porter is, of course, about a very different kind of bad work, but that overwhelming, really oppressive sense of time panic is there. Baxter is constantly on the edge of losing ever more years of his life to the train. Sometimes it feels like what puts the clock on life is not mortality, but work. And yet, in Sheila's novel, Motherhood, we have a completely different view of work. I think of it as a happy workplace novel in a way, because the protagonist takes on these kind of moral or spiritual and intellectual feats of strength, and at the end she overcomes them. And what she gets in return is a work, is the book that we're reading, and it's transcendent. She says, my life was spared. And we understand that she's cheated this clock on her life through work, because sometimes to work can be a joy, right? It can be a way to get at something greater than yourself. So novels are not how-tos, but nonetheless, I guess this is the big question of this whole event. What do you think is the job of fiction or storytelling in helping us to manage work, how inevitable it is, and how much time it takes, whether or not it brings us joy?
I mean, a writer does a very different kind of work than most people in the world, because it is a calling and it is a joy, and it does build your soul in the way that I think a lot of work it does the opposite. You know, it sort of hurts you and takes you away from what's really truly most meaningful to you. So I don't know, for myself, like I think I kind of sometimes see that my books are maybe for artists, maybe more than anyone else, that I really am writing about what it means to do that with your days, to do that with your life, to feel like that's kind of what you're here for, which is how I feel. I'm really interested in this friend of mine. She sent me a new manuscript, Adele Waldman, who wrote The Love Affairs of Nathaniel P. She's like just finished a book. She worked at Target for like 6 months to research it, and the book is about a workplace. And she really wanted to write like a capitalist novel, which I guess for her was about, it's not about an individual, it's about how a group of individuals interrelate. And so it's like this multicast novel, and how the system of the workplace and capitalism like makes their lives impossible. And that really seems to me like a novel about work in a way that, like, if you're writing about one person and their soul, it's, again, like I feel like this word work is a very strange word to apply to that. Like, I mean, I feel like it's writing about making art is closer to writing about religion than writing about labor, you know?
And yet I think when we're at work, even the kind like wage work, there is always that sense of spirituality, simply because it does, if it's the kind of work you don't like, it's a work that really weighs on your spirit. It's funny too, because something I've started to think about a lot is how, yes, being an artist is this very specific thing, and you're pulling from yourself, right? But there's a way in which it seems like almost everybody in the working world now has to do that, because of the way that people now have personal brands that pull from themselves, and there's so many things that you have to navigate with that, with understanding who are you, like on your socials, who are you in real life. So I think maybe in a slightly perverse way that your work does apply to sort of a larger group than just people who are making art for a living.
Yeah, and How Should a Person Be is like a lot about how do you present yourself in the world, and that's like such a huge concern, like exactly with people appearing online, and like how do you, the work of the self, superficially, but also truly. Yeah.
And it's interesting in The Sleeping Car Porter, because Baxter is putting forward a persona, and he also, I don't think it's spoiling it too much to say that he longs to be a dentist. Yeah. Do you think of that as a calling for him, or maybe you didn't think about it that way? He's always thinking about people's teeth, and I think as I read the book, I wondered, because there are people who have like kind of good jobs or higher paying jobs in the book who also seem a bit miserable about their work. There's like some pulp and paper men. So I did wonder, like, what if Baxter becomes a dentist and he finds it just as draining on his spirit as like being a sleeping car porter?
His being a dentist, it was partly that, he was in such a dead-end, terrible job that he needed to have some way out. And so, of course, it's about money, but I think he truly actually has an obsession with teeth. and wants to.
Maybe it is a calling.
You know, I think it is a calling. He just is so in love with people's mouths, you know, and part of it is his job, which is that he has to be able to, you know, passengers are texts, and he has to be able to read these texts and understand them and understand these passengers more than they understand themselves and anticipate their needs. And by being able to, whenever they open their mouths and they're yelling at him, being able to study their teeth and their bites and you know how rotten their teeth are, how their breath smells. I mean, it's a way of escaping his present, but it's also another text. He can also read them, but I think he's in love with the interior of people. And even when he's, you know, hooking up with guys in the park, the first thing he does is put his tongue on their teeth just to get to know them.
So that's the question that he doesn't ask, what do you do? He's like, let me see your teeth.
Let me see your teeth. Exactly.
So I want to ask a question about how to sequence a novel about work or how to organize it. I've been working on a novel about work, and I've been very upset to realize that cause and effect, or causation, which is my old friend, how I've organized all my past stories, that it kind of falls apart in the face of the workplace novel. And that's because when we're at work, there often is no cause and effect chain. We work very hard and it affects nothing. Or when we get success, we have to reckon with the horror of the fact that so much of success comes to us through arbitrary and random means. And then on top of that, when time is so central to work and sequence is essentially simply the arrangement of time, it seems that that's all the more vital in getting that right in a novel about work. So we've come to the secret reason of why I actually invited you here, which is to help me with my storytelling problems. How did you sequence your novels about work? What's the principle that organizes them? How did you decide what goes where, how it begins, how it proceeds?
So what's your problem, really?
What's my problem? My problem is that I can't use causation. I started writing a detective novel, and I was very happy, and I got 80 pages into it, and I was like, it all feels so fake. I thought to myself, I'm just writing about imaginary people who do imaginary things and have imaginary feelings, and all my friends were like, that's what you do for a living? You know, that's fine. And I realized that the problem was that I was trying to make it follow causation, and that was not thematically correct. So I had to find something else. Are you going to solve my problems, Susan?
Well, with the detective, like, does he have, I mean, there's paperwork?
Yes.
There are so when I think
You
about...
really are going to solve my problems.
Well, I'll try. I will try. So there's a rhythm to a day, even if you're a detective and you're chasing the murderer, right? And so, I mean, with my own work, it's the rhythm of the books. The last two books have been structured around the rhythm of the work. So, for example, with Edith Vane, the Edith Vane book, it's structured according to the months. So the worst months for me as an academic are August, September, October, November, December. Because August is like Sunday syndrome for a whole month because you know it's coming. September is the very beginning of school and it sucks because there's so much to do. October, there's Halloween, that's okay, but it's still not enough. And then November is the horrible month because it goes on forever and there's no time off. And then December, it's final exams. So that's how that book was structured, and it's just sort of, okay, these are the things that are coming down, and you know. And then with Baxter, with the sleeping car porter, it's structured according to, okay, he's got this leg of the trip, so, but you know, Sudbury to Winnipeg, you know, Winnipeg to Calgary, whatever. And so it's all broken down into the days and the distance covered. So I don't know if there's maybe a way with your book where you can
really
take a look
helping.
at, okay, take a look at, okay, what do detectives actually do in a day? And surely he's got, he, she, they have more than one case.
Yes.
You know, and so how do you structure that? Oh, okay, I've got to figure out this murder before noon and that murder from 12 to 2, and then do paperwork from 2 to 4:30. So
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I love that too, because you're so right. I didn't think of that, but yes, now that you pointed out, yeah, that's exactly it. The works are organized around the length of it, and then something terrible happens to Baxter on the train where you mess with the rhythm of the work. The train gets stuck, and I was thinking to myself, I guess he's not getting paid by the hour. Like,
no.
Yeah, he gets paid by the trip.
Well, yeah, I can't remember. Oh, it's been so long now. Yeah.
I assumed he wasn't getting paid by the hour because he wasn't happy.
No, and their hours were counted strangely. So if you were in transit, on the way to a job you wouldn't get paid. And I wonder if he gets stuck in the mountains, if he gets paid for those additional 45 hours. I don't know. I'd have to go check my files. Probably not.
Probably not, because he was not happy about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know what you mean about they're not, like, how do you structure a novel if there's no cause and effect? Because I think with motherhood, there is no cause and effect with that book. Not motherhood. There's obviously a cause and then an effect. But it's like she's thinking and thinking and thinking, and I really wanted it to be this exhausting, endless, repetitive cycle of, like, how do you come to know what to do with your life? And so how do you put some arc in that? And there's sort of, I think, 2 arcs that I figured out. And one is just like the movement from culturally received ideas to her own ideas. So there was like there was a movement that way, away from what you had taught to think, to what you really did think after much investigation. And then because it was about her and her relationship to her body, I figured out, like, maybe it can be, and I was thinking about how, like, story, they always say, like, story is modeled on the like rising sexual tension, and then like ejaculation, like this male kind of, I don't know, why is that male? I mean, women ejaculate, or like a climax and then like release or whatever, like. And I was like, well, but I was thinking, everyone says that's like a male biology-based story structure, and I was like, what would the female one be? And then I was thinking about the menstrual cycle and like the way you sort of move through phases every month. And so the book was partly also structured around that. So there would be like the bleeding, and then there would be like the phase right after your period, and then there would be like, anyways, the PMS and like ovulation, and like, so I just had it be this cycle of like rising and falling moods basically, and like seeing like in the PMS, like seeing everything is incredibly dark, and like all her thoughts about whatever she was thinking about was inflected by those hormones that sort of make one feel very dark and depressed. And then when she was ovulating, like everything looks very optimistic and very bright. So it was this cycle in that way. So I guess, I don't know, is your detective a woman? I don't know, I think there's all sorts of, like Suzette's saying, like there's seasons, there's all sorts of like external things and physical things that, I don't know, but maybe it's...
I've really been limiting myself with this cause and effect business.
Yeah, cause and effect, but I guess that is a lot of plot, isn't it?
Yeah, my old friend. Did you find that shape before or after, or during?
During,
Okay,
yeah.
It became clear. Yeah.
Well, because I had all this writing, and it was like hundreds of thousands of words, and I was like, this just all looks the same to me. Like, how can I distinguish this page from this page? And I love Scrivener, and I would just start to like, okay, how can I categorize this paragraph and this paragraph? Well, this paragraph is optimistic, this paragraph is pessimistic, or this paragraph is like a certain kind of anxiety. So I started clumping things together, and then, because it was all started off with scraps. But I find that the most fun part of writing a novel is actually figuring out the structure and the form.
The shape, okay,
Yeah.
all right. Thank you for this onstage workshop, both of you.
I'm sure it won't help. I'm sure it won't help.
So I want to turn to the question of you as workers yourselves, as people who make a living from art. We talked earlier, and we've talked throughout, about the difference between work as a wage and work as a vocation or a calling. And in actual fact, what I'm interested in is when the two coincide. Despite the adage that you should do something you love, my experience has been that when your calling becomes your wage, it can be kind of an unholy mixture, because then it's this thing that comes from yourself that is now given a price determined by market rate. Sometimes I think that what artists want to achieve is at odds with itself. You want to create something original, something that connects with readers in a new way, but the only way to get to your readers is through the market, and the market's job is to take this original thing and to make it interchangeable, to make it into an exchange good that can be bought and sold. And when this happens, your work is stacked up against other books, and then its value is determined relative to them, and you lose your work in the crowd. So I wanted to ask you, how do you manage this desire or drive or even calling to make art with the fact that once it's out, it's tallied up in terms of sales and prizes and mentions. And at least from a historical point of view, you lose control of the ability to say what the value is of the thing you made.
Okay. I guess I just stopped thinking about that a long time ago because this is my 6th book, and I have 5 books before, and there was no way I was going to make a living wage from any of those books. And I did have an episode early in my life, I think with my 2nd book, where I was approached by, so I'd just written my 1st book, which did its thing, and then I was approached by a really big press, and they said, we like this book, but we want you to write a 2nd book, and you need to have the book done by this date. And then we'll sign you up for all the money you've ever wished for in your life at that point. So early 90s, so that was about $7, but whatever. Anyway, so I beavered away at writing this book, and I worked, and it was just not very good, but I was gonna make that deadline, and I was gonna get that money, and la la la. And then it turned out that the press that I was, the press that was interested in the book was also publishing Jay Leno's memoir. And Jay Leno, and they'd paid him like $1 million, and he wrote a crappy memoir, and it made no money, and so my contract got cut. And I remember having a moment of, what have I done? In that, Jay Leno. Anyway, so I just thought, this cannot be the reason why I do this, because it matters so much to me, and it's part of who I am, and it keeps me happy, and it keeps me stable and sane. And so I just thought, what, from now on, I'm just going to write what I want to write. If it does well, it does well. What does that even mean? I've just got to find a publisher who respects me and won't dump me the second, the equivalent of Jay Leno doesn't do well. So.
Did that Jay Leno fueled book, did you publish it? Did it become something else?
I did publish it. It took a lot longer, and what was really sad was that the local press that was going to publish it, they were also dropping me. So it was a moment of what am I doing? Who is this for? I've let these people into my room, and they've put cigarette butts and garbage all over the place, and they're not invited. So it's just got to always be about I have to write the books I write, and they've got to matter to me, and that's all that matters. And then you put it out in the world, and you hope people read it and understand it and like it. And if they do, that's awesome. But I can never quit my day job. That's just not a fact of life.
It almost sounds like you're describing something like where you eat a lot of something until it makes you physically sick, and then you're just revolted by it from there on in? Is that the strategy? Because I think it's because what you're saying is so sensible. But sometimes in practice it's harder to
well, there's huge pressure. There's huge pressure to do well, and you want to do right by your press, and you don't want them to be embarrassed by you. So so I don't know, that put kind of a U-turn in what you were saying, but
Feel like any compromise with writing books. I've never, sort of like Suzette saying, with this deadline, I've never accepted a deadline for a book. The book's done when it's done. I was also offered a 2-book deal early in my career, and they had a deadline for the 2nd book, and I was like, I don't think I could. I thought about it for a while, and I was like, I don't even think I can come up with an idea. So I've never felt like I'm writing for a deadline. I've also always kind of had editors I've never had an editor that or an agent who's told me to change the book in a way to make it more commercial. I feel like maybe that happens, but I've never had that happen somehow. Maybe I've been lucky. But for me, the difficulty has been in, to make a living as a writer, I've done not teaching, but a lot of journalism, and I wrote a column for Flair, and all this sort of thing, and I feel so precious, I guess, about putting my name on something, and I've really had to become a lot less precious just to make a living. So I'm writing a profile for Flair. It's not something that I want to show to everybody, but I need the money. And so I've had to become more like, okay, not everything you write is going to be something that you love and feel super proud of and feel is like the greatest thing you've ever done. And so there's just a way in which you kind of like muddy yourself a little bit. And I have had the feeling of like, after a book goes out into the world, and I always read the reviews, like it does sort of stop being yours. Like I don't mind that it's a commodity in a market. That's what a book is. That doesn't bother me. But I do feel like the fact that it no longer is this private object sort of dulls the sheen of it for me a bit. Like it stops being this kind of like magical pulsing secret thing, and it just becomes something that people don't like, or or like can talk about it in a way that is like not understanding. And I've gotten used to it, but I always feel a little hurt and a little bit of dread when a book is coming out, because it's going to stop being what I think it is, and my thoughts about it are going to be what other people's thoughts about it are too. So
How do you get past that feeling?
just write a new book.
Yeah. Make another one. Yeah. I know, it's funny. You and I met in 2018, and that was actually the advice you gave me then. You were like, don't worry about it, just keep writing. And I feel like now all the time I think about that. Sometimes there's other things in my life, like small children I have to take care of, but I always think, Sheila said to keep writing, just keep writing.
Yeah, because the current book, no one knows about it, and it can be just private and yours and special, and like the process is what is actually beautiful about it. I mean, you always want to be done for some reason, but that is really the art part.
Strange. Yeah. Not to say that we don't want you all to read our work, I should say. So we're coming to the end of this portion of our talk. We're going to turn to audience questions in a minute, so if you have something to say, you'll get to say it. But my last question is, when you're writing about work, how do you find a great end to the story? It strikes me that we're talking about something that is infinite. Work never ends, work is never finished, but we're trying to shove it into this finite form, the form of the novel. So as people who have successfully ended novels about work, how did you find an arc that was satisfying or even fortifying when writing about something whose arc is actually kind of Sisyphean? You make such a funny face, Suzette.
It's because endings are so hard for me. I have no answer is the problem. I'm trying to come up with something intelligent to say, and it's, I guess if I wanted to be, I don't know, a short answer would be, well, there's always Saturday. The week ends. At some point you get a day off, and is that the natural ending? But I don't think so, especially, with the one book where the ending, and I don't know if this is a spoiler, but what happens is that she can never leave work. She's stuck there and has to work every day for the rest of whatever remains of her life. And with the sleeping car porter, he does finally reach Vancouver, and so can get off the train, but and then there's possible ending beyond that, but I don't know. I just honestly don't have a good answer. I mean, the only thing I can think of with it, there's that old adage where, a good ending is an ending where once you finish the book or you finish the story or you finish the poem, you want to go back to the beginning and reread it. So it gives some sort of resonance that echoes beyond the end. But how do you do that? That is the hard question. That's the hard part, right? Sheila has the answer.
But that's interesting. I feel like it ties into what you were saying earlier about sequence, that it does have to also do with the rhythms of the work, and you find the rhythm at the end.
Yeah, I guess for me, I often find the ending midway through writing the book. Like I'll have this sentence and I'm like, oh, that's clearly the end, so that I'm writing to that ending. So that kind of makes it a little easier maybe, because you know where you're going. And often where I'm going is like, because my books are so involved, well, I think every writer's books are so involved with where they are sort of spiritually and psychically at that time in their life. I really want the ending to be like, okay, now you can move on to the next level, like a video game. Like, okay, now you've finished this problem, you've solved it, like now you're on the next level. So I kind of like an ending that really does end that quest, whatever that quest is. And with Pure Color, it was interesting because I handed in the book to my editor and I thought it was done, but like I had this little feeling inside myself like, it's not done. Like it's, and I don't know why, but it's not, and it's not. And then I think like a week after handing it in, I just told myself, I almost hypnotized myself. I was like, now you're gonna write the ending to the book. And I just wrote it. I wrote the last 3 pages of the book, and they were exactly, they explained the whole book in some way that I didn't know was inside me. Almost like I'd unconsciously known, but I was just like, okay, now I'm ready to have the ending. I'd never had that experience before. I don't expect I'll ever have it again, but that was really strange, where I sometimes think like maybe the ending is sort of inside you the same way the whole book is kind of inside you, and you just have to sort of find it. But that was a relief, and then after I got that ending, I was like, okay, now the whole book is, now it is really done. But yeah.
So was that book different from the others in that the ending you were writing towards turned out to not be the ending?
Yeah, exactly. And I felt like I mean, I don't think it's a spoiler or anything, but like at the end of the book, it's sort of revealed in some way that it's a bedtime story that either like she's telling herself or the father's telling her. And I was like, oh, that makes the whole book make sense to me in a way that it hadn't until I wrote that ending. So it's just weird, like the degrees of knowing and not knowing when you're writing something, like how much you don't know and have to not know. Like you have to sort of not know what you're doing.
I'm fascinated by this hypnotism.
Yeah.
Some of the academics here might ask you, but can you tell me how to hypnotize myself?
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Sheila and Suzette. Now, if we have any questions from the audience. If you, I guess you can put your hand up, and I think are there mics? The mic will travel to you. Yes. Oh, here we go. So right in the front.
Yeah, thank you very much for your conversation. It's been absolutely fascinating. You talked about writing about labor. I would be interested in hearing you talk about your physical labor as writers. How do you organize? Thank you. How do you organize your date? How do you sit? What implements do you need to write? That kind of thing. Thank you.
If everybody, I'm not sure if everyone heard that, but the question was about how physically do we as writers organize our day? Like, are there implements or things like that we use? Oh, okay. Actually, it's funny. I was talking to a writer that I worked with who's actually here, who was telling me about how you need to trigger your body into knowing that it's time to work, and also trigger your body into knowing when it's not time to work. And I realized that I sort of knew you're supposed to do that, but I haven't been doing that, and as a result, I haven't been doing a very good job of getting my work done. I've just been waiting for Sheila and Suzette to arrive to solve my problems. But I've discovered that actually works. So one of the big things I think also, I'm sure anybody who works on a project knows how important and how difficult it can be to find a way to focus. So I've started playing a song, and I play the song, and then I start reading a short story. And for some reason, reading short stories always triggers me to want to write. And that's how I know I'm in the zone. And if you want to know, the song is Ultra Nate Free, the house anthem from the 90s. And that's been working so far this go around.
For me, it took me a long time to learn that the act of writing should not be precious. So it shouldn't be, I've got to have these conditions and this pen and these objects, that it doesn't get done if you start making it into something special. And so for that reason, I'm way more of a writer nowadays who dictates into a phone as I'm walking the dog, or who, I've got my notebook that I have with me all the time, and I'll jot down notes. And then the hard part is the actual sitting down in front of the computer to get it together. And something has happened to me recently, or in recent years, where before, writing was a completely solitary act, and now I have a writing group, and I don't know why that's happened, but it works. So it's sort of basically about, making a meeting or an appointment with myself to do this work. So every Sunday afternoon for about 3 hours, I get on Zoom with 2 writer friends, and we gossip for about 15 minutes, and then we write for an hour, and then gossip for 15 minutes, and then write for an hour. And it's amazing how much work I get done, even though it's once a week. But I'm also bringing in all of those dictations and scrappy notes. And I totally agree about reading as a trigger to writing, because it sure helps to have those books around you that either are connected to the topic that you're interested in, or that, that somehow just light that, spark that fuse. I find that super useful, to just read a couple pages of, some text that is relevant to what I'm doing.
I think it always makes me feel like I would like to do this too.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I don't have set times when I work. I just feel like every day is different, but then I started having this problem where like I don't actually know how much work I'm getting done as a result. And so I put this, I only write on the computer, I put this timing tracking app on my computer, and it tells me how much time I spend on everything. And it's terrible to like look at the results of that. But because I write in sort of chunks, like maybe I'll write in the morning, I'll in the evening, not write for a week, I don't know, it's just so random. Now that I have this timing tracker, it's called Timing, I can see like now I can have a goal. I can be like, okay, I want to write what I've started doing is saying I want to write 2 hours, and I can see that I have or haven't. Whereas before I could never really quantify it. So maybe it's becoming like more of an actual punch in, punch out kind of worker, which is useful because otherwise you can really just spend your whole day replying to other people. That's sort of so much easier to do that, to give other people what they're requesting than to. So I feel like that app is really helping a lot.
Do we have another question?
Hi, my name is Sharda. So one of my friends has a podcast called the Stacks Podcast, and one of the favorite questions that she asks her guests that I wanted to ask you is, what is a book that's perhaps in conversation with a book that you guys have spoken about today? Something that you think, as we've read your book or as we do read your book, that could be in conversation with it.
I gotta think about this for a second.
So right now I have to get started on the next project, and I don't really know what that is yet. And I think I don't know, for a while I thought I'm gonna write a haunted house novel, but it's not doing it for me. But there's a book that I came across a couple of years ago that was absolutely fascinating to me, and it was called The Elementals by Michael McDowell, and it's sort of a recovered haunted house classic, and it's set in the South in the 60s, I think, 60s or 70s, or maybe, I can't remember, anyway. And it's about this old white Southern family who have this set of houses that are on a beach. And so they've got 3 houses, and there's the 2 houses that the family live in, and then there's the 3rd house, which is the cursed house, and it's kind of slowly being eaten by a sand dune. And so it's all these, white Southern people and doing their things, but they have a maid named Odessa Red, who is absolutely fascinating to me because whenever they're in trouble, they kind of go to her, trying to find, okay, all right, voodoo, okay, help us get away from these ghosts, who are haunting us. But the thing about Odessa Red is that she has this whole other life that is just gestured toward, that is just suggested. And one of the ghosts in the house that's being taken over by a sand dune is her daughter, Martha. And the first time you see Martha, she's got her braids and she opens her mouth and all the sand falls out of her mouth. And so I'm really wanting to retrieve Odessa Red and give her her own story. And I don't know if I'll necessarily do that in a, explicit way, but I'm very curious about her because she's, on one hand, she's a servant. On the other hand, and there's also that kind of stereotype of, the magical Black person who will solve all your problems, and she doesn't succeed. But she's got this very rich inner life, and the text it kind of revolves around her, even though it's about these extremely wealthy white people. So that's that's the text I'm kind of having a conversation with right now. I don't know where it will go, but it's the book I have beside me where, I'll dip into it and it's like, okay, I can do something. I don't know what I'm doing yet though. So, And it's agonizing, of course, because it's set in the South. There's so much racism, but she's such a gorgeous character. Like, she's so powerful and interesting, so, yeah.
It's so interesting wanting to save a character.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's also the problem with endings, is they determine what happens. So I like that idea that you can recuperate it.
I guess the book that comes to mind for me is, I wouldn't have written Motherhood if I hadn't read this book first, which is by Rachel Cusk, called A Life's Work. And it is about, she had a child, and then she wrote this book and had another child. I think she just said, I don't know how she puts it, but she had a baby, and then she sort of had this experience of the work of having a baby and how hard that is and how nobody writes about that. And I think it came out probably in 2001 or something, where there really hadn't been any books like that. I really think it was like kind of a renegade sort of things to write that book. People hated her talking about how hard it is to be a mother of young children. But anyways, and then she realized after a year or two that she'd forgotten all that she had done while writing that book, how hard it had been. It's almost like it had vanished from her mind. So when she had the second child, she was like, I'm going to keep notes and I'm going to write. So that book is fantastic, and it just really is about, this thing that motherhood is. I mean, it's no longer, it gets increasingly less romanticized the more women write about it, but I feel like when she was writing about it, she was one of the first to say, this is labor, this is really hard, this is extremely lonely, this is all these things. That's a really terrific book, and I think it gave me the feeling of like, you can write about those things that are sort of hidden in your own private life, and that they do have a place, in other people's lives. I mean, just the personal, political kind of thing. But yeah, that was such an important book to me. She's a terrific writer.
I feel like this is like jinxing myself to talk about my process before the book is published, but just because I'm having so much problems with the cause and effect chain, I had been reading, for my detective novel, a lot of novels that are very propulsive, but that don't use causation. So I was looking at Leave the World Behind by Rumaan Alam, which pretends to use causation. You Were Eating an Orange, You Were Naked by Shung King, which is so propulsive. It's just two people talking to each other. And the one that I really hit on, and I may regret telling you all this later on, but is Convenience Store Woman by Sayaka Murata, because what I was very fascinated by is that, again, like conventionally, this idea is that stories are supposed to have like a character development arc, right? Like someone like, what are they willing to give up and how are they willing to change to get what they want? And what I find really interesting about that book is that it's kind of inverted. Like the character is fine. And the question is she going to like survive this world that keeps trying to make her different? So I'm just basically stealing that shape. And I may regret, just pretend I didn't say that. Do we have another question? Oh, a lot. We have a few, okay. Is there a mic? There's one at the back. Is there? Oh, there's microphones close to there. Okay.
So I was wondering if you believe that everybody has a calling, and also if you sometimes find it difficult to relate to characters that you are writing about, who either don't have a calling or perhaps have a calling that you particularly have a difficult time relating to.
Does everybody have a calling? Do you ever write about a character who doesn't have a calling, or maybe has a calling you can't relate to?
I don't think I've ever done that.
Written about?
A character that doesn't have a calling, or a calling I don't relate to. No.
Yeah, sometimes you might just be like, well, this is not the story for me.
Yeah.
I think, I have, I would say that probably the last book I wrote about Edith Vane, the professor, I think she thinks being an academic is her calling, but it's just not. And so she fails spectacularly. And it's not that you, of course, will fail if it's not your calling, but there needs to be something that is driving you. And so I think she has a very idealized understanding of what being an academic is. She thinks it's about writing, reading books, interacting with books, talking about books with people who are also interested in talking about books. And that's not what the job is a lot of it isn't that. And so she gets in trouble. And so, yeah. And I think, I wonder about the whole idea of calling. Is it kind of, I don't know, where does that come from? Is that about, is that a religious
I went to
thing?
convent school, so that's where I heard it from.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Called to be a nun, which I wasn't.
But I've heard there are jobs that are calling, so, medical professionals or.
Sometimes I think teaching is a calling.
Teaching,
too.
yeah.
In my last novel, An Ocean of Minutes, it's about migrant workers, so they're sort of not allowed to have a calling, but I think a lot of them do have something that approximates a calling, because it what enables them to feel kind of human, like they're not allowed to have this thing, so in their heart they have this thing, which maybe is a bit like Baxter and the teeth. And then there are some characters who they don't have a calling because they find their sense of meaning or sense of self from somewhere else that's not related to their labor or what they produce. Yeah. Oh, and I think, did we have the question here? Yeah.
Thanks so much. Thanks for such a wonderful conversation. So Thea, one of the ways that you framed today's conversation was through Lauren Berlant's Cruel Optimism, which is the idea that when there's something you desire, it becomes an obstacle to your own flourishing. So I just wondered if you had any thoughts about that concept, cruel optimism. And if you don't want to speak about that, then there's at least 4 other things there. So there's the cruelty, there's optimism that you could speak about, there's desire or flourishing. So you can choose any 4 of those or cruel optimism itself to talk about.
I think I started out, when I was writing my detective novel, I started out using cruel optimism as kind of an organizing principle, actually. I found that interesting, that this person is like colluding with their own exploitation because they think on the other side is going to get better. But now I've changed. Now I'm trying to make kind of like this reverse novel where one of the things that I changed other than cause and effect was that I started out with a character who was very bitter and angry, and now I've actually made her very happy, which is such a strange thing to write about a happy, well-adjusted person. But I still think that idea is so fascinating, and I worry about it in myself. I worry about, it was very moving when when Ke Huy Quan won the Oscar, but I sort of was laughing with my spouse that he said that his spouse had said, never give up on your dreams. And I was like, maybe sometimes people should give up. Not that he should have, but maybe, sometimes it's okay to give up on your dreams. And sometimes when I work with writers who are beginning to be writers, that can also be a conversation that we have. Maybe this isn't for you, and that's wonderful, and that's how you find out what you really do want to do. So I find it fascinating, this idea that we love optimism, we love hopefulness, if you're chasing your dreams, run faster, but I actually have all sorts of phrases like that now over my desk because I'm fascinated by them and I'm worried that someone's going to come in and think I'm saying them to myself. But I think it's such a useful engine. I wouldn't be surprised if it winds up figuring into another one of my books in some way.
I love that book, Cruel Optimism. It's so interesting. I think probably one of the closest, the closest I've ever got to dealing with that idea in my books is probably motherhood, where it's partly about are you even wanting the things that you want? And how do you know what you want and what you're told you want? Or how do you know what will make you happy or what you're told will make you happy? And, especially as women, you're told, well, having a child will make you happy because it makes women happy. And there's this optimism of, I'm just like everybody else and we're all the same. And just by being a woman, I have these natural triggers that will come into, that will result from doing this, that will cause this. And I think that's also, I think that's, again, what Rachel Cusk's book in part was about. You're promised that motherhood will be a certain way, and it's absolutely, in her experience, not. And so I think, it's an interesting idea, and a really important idea, that idea of cruel optimism. That,
on the other side,
that there's the thinking that you're going to have a happy result, or you're going to achieve something, or you're going to reach a certain place, which most people don't. But even if you do reach that place, then the emotional affect is going to be what they promise you that it's going to be, which is not usually the case either. It's interesting. There's a book that I love called Regretting Motherhood by this Israeli sociologist, Una Dornath, or something, and she interviews all these women who are mothers. They're all anonymous in her study. Women who regret having become mothers, not people who are ambivalent about it, but who actually thinks I shouldn't have done this, because ambivalence is something quite different. And it's just really the most heartbreaking book. I remember always this one woman who's a grandmother, and she's like, now I have to do this all over again. Like, I thought I was done. And in fact, now I'm expected to be on the floor with the grandchildren. And it's really sad, like, especially in Israeli culture, much more so than in Canada. Like, you have to be a mother. Like, the family is so important, and you're having children for the state. It's not just for you. And so there's the added pressure. Yeah, it's a fantastic book, Regretting Motherhood. Very interesting, very much about the Lauren Berlant ideas.
I think I don't know that book. I don't know the concept that well. Can you tell me more?
It's just this idea that if we believe in our dreams, it's actually a way to get us to collude with our own exploitation. So this idea that, like, if you work harder, you'll achieve all your dreams. And I think what I find fascinating is how wholeheartedly we believe that that's true, even though all of us know people who work very hard and don't achieve their dreams, and yet we hang on to it. Yeah.
Well, it's what gets you through the job, isn't it?
It is, yeah. So it's something that helps you and also keeps you in place.
Exactly. I don't think I have much more to add. I mean, I have a character who, is, you mentioned the quotation where there's the professor character who says, I am the architect of my own life, and this is the mantra. She gives herself over and over again in order to get through the job. And as you mentioned, that's not true. The institution is the architect of your life, and trying to do your best is impossible. And if you do your best, you will be absorbed and you will be eaten. So it's sort of that whole treadmill, I guess, of trying to do the best at your job, even though it's eating you alive.
Yes. Yeah. And it's kind of terrifying to think that the things you say to support yourself are actually going to harm you. Yeah. Do we have time for one more question? Or yes. Yeah, sure.
Hi, I'm Jennifer. I am an academic. Here at the U of T, I'm a historian. But I usually like to think of myself as a professional reader. That's a thing that a way I can think of what I do. My question is, I think, at least for me and maybe for others, we become readers as kids. So I wanted to ask, what was a book that really lit up your world when you were a kid, or a book that maybe frightened you to pieces, that just took you over as a kid and kind of opened your mind? What book has stayed with you?
There's a book I really loved by a Toronto-based writer named Bernice Thurman Hunter called That Scatterbrain Bookie. And it took place I guess it was about her life as a child in the Great Depression in Toronto. And I think the fact that it was in Toronto, and it was like a little girl that was like blonde and skinny, I just felt like so much this is so close and so far, because it was in the 30s, but it was in Toronto, and her character's personality felt like mine, and it was just, I don't know, I just loved it. I loved that book, and I think it had pictures, photographs in it from her own childhood, and I think I must have read that book 50 times or something like that. And then in a later book, she grows up to be, there's 2 more books, and she grows up to become a writer, and I think I loved that book. She's a great, I don't know if she's probably not still alive, Bernice Thurman Hunter.
So when I was young, it took me a long time to be able to read. So I didn't read very much until about grade 5 or grade 6, and then I just went. And I remember asking my father for a book about the Greek myths, and he gave me this little paperback that sort of took all, like Ovid's Metamorphoses and everything, and sort of boiled them down into this wee little book. And I was fascinated. I was absolutely fascinated, especially by stories about transformation. They were absolutely compelling. Or, the whole Medusa story, and her hair was made of what? And she turned people into stone? I just thought it was fabulous. Especially because there were so many women who were, they're about to be raped or whatever, and they would just turn around and boom, they would, do whatever. So I think that book, those stories were huge for me. They were hugely formative. And I remember years later reading, as an undergrad, I got exposed to the Fairy Queen, and it was sort of the same moment of, this is completely bizarre and delightful, and, it definitely has infected my work, for sure, having that early source of, specifically Greco-Roman myths. Yeah.
I think a book that stayed with me is Ferdinand the Bull. It's kind of an obvious answer. But I've been reading, I have little kids, so I've been reading it with them. And if you don't know the story of Ferdinand the Bull, Ferdinand is supposed to, become a fierce bull, and he just wants to sit and smell the flowers. And I've been it's strange when you come across things that you liked as a child, and then you read them again as an adult, and you're like, oh, so predictable that I would like this book. But I do still really like that idea of this bull who's like, I just want to do my own thing. I'm just going to sit and, smell the flowers, and he's not too worried about what other people think. He's going to do his thing, and it's going to be okay. So I guess it's maybe a good lesson for me. I'm still trying to learn.
That's a beautiful book. Yeah. I love that. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much to Sheila and Suzette, and to all of you. I think we have some closing remarks now from Dr. Stock.
Thank you very much. This was a really great event. It was a stimulating conversation, and I was really very, very pleased to see so many of you here and to have you here as guests. So thanks again to our panelists, Thea Lim, Sheila Heti, and Suzette Mayr. And I'd also like to thank a couple more people who were really instrumental in bringing this about. Most of all, Siobhan O'Flynn as the director of the Canadian Studies program at UC, Mahisha Ramasa as our special events supervisor, Sarah Franco, and you see these people around here, as our special events assistant. And of course, all of you audience members who participated, asked questions, listened, and joined us tonight. This is not the end of the evening, although it is the end of the official part. Please join us now for a reception and a book signing in the Paul Cadario Conference Center at Croft Chapter House. And there are people around here, so if you can't find it, just ask someone. Sometimes it's hard to find your way around in this building. You may also purchase books in UC 179, books by our authors. Also in the Croft Chapter House. Thank you, that's great. So I get signs from the back, and when I see this kind of sign, I think this must be a round place. So also in the Croft Chapter House. We would like to thank Type Books for making this book sale happen. And finally, we're pleased to say that our dessert selection this evening has been provided by local Toronto bakery Bar Noi, who we chose for this event because of their commitment to fair working conditions, just to close the circle. So see you over there. Thank you so much for coming out, and thanks again to our speakers.